Welcome to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski. You know, we were about health and wellness, and we try to convey a message here that causes you to investigate and look into your own health and wellness, because you don't want to be at the beck and call of somebody else. In other words, what I'm saying here is you should know and be informed to understand your own health and wellness. And that's what we try to do on the Dr. Ed Show. We don't diagnose, we don't treat, but we hope to empower you. And I also do that on my radio show, the Dr. Ed Show, every Saturday morning on AM 1250 The Answer from 9 a.m. to 10. And I have a good friend here and a wonderful educator, a wonderful practitioner, although he's retired now, but he consults all the time, Dr. Gary Fieber.
Good morning.
And I appreciate you coming in to help us educate our audience, Dr. Fieber. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a chiropractor, but you've been retired.
Right. I practiced in Minnesota for 30 plus years. Did not only chiropractic, certified in acupuncture, did a lot in what today people call functional medicine. Then it was clinical nutrition. And I had a very large women's and children's practice. And we did that for a long time. I started traveling and teaching back in the early 2000s. In fact, that's how I ended up in Pennsylvania, because when I finally sold my practice, I'd come out here to work with technology, especially in the chiropractic and physical medicine world, and was fortunate enough to meet you at a Starbucks. And we developed into a friendship and I enjoy what you do, and I still teach other doctors, and I have some private healthcare coaching clients that I deal with, and just trying to help people, like you say, understand exactly how they can help themselves function at a higher level, feel better, and live longer.
So chiropractic care is pretty critical, in my opinion. And I remember as a little kid, my father throwing his back out and going to a chiropractor, and I'm sitting in the reception area, and he's back there yelling as the chiropractor was adjusting him. I'm going like, why do you do that to yourself? But he got better quickly, and he got out of pain. And when I started to get older and started to have little issues, I started going to a chiropractor, and I go all the time. I've been doing it for years, and just as a preventative measure, actually, because of my profession. I'm always in this state, and I'm pretty active with sports and mountain biking and hiking and all those things. So we are nothing but a tube. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are basically, and chiropractic's got a lot of weird stuff that people think about it. Yes, we typically adjust the spine because you got the brain in the skull, and you've got the spinal cord connected to the brain, and it runs down between the spine, which is a tube, and through that is where the nervous system runs. And from that comes all of these nerves that go to every part of your body.
And along with those nerves are blood vessels.
Blood vessels, muscle connection, you name it.
So all the nutrition, all the oxygen, all the fluids are all paralleling each other and working together to make us function. And if you take a garden hose and you kink that, the water doesn't flow.
Right.
Does that happen in your body as well?
Oh, it happens, and it happens a lot in a very restricted manner sometimes, or it can be there for a long time. I liken it to, if you put a rubber band gently around your finger, you may not notice it for a while. However, at some point, that end of that finger may get a little red or start to swell. Now, if that's a nerve, okay, wherever that nerve goes, it's going to affect it's just like a battery in a car or anywhere else. It'll shut down some of that nerve supply, blood supply. So whatever's at the end of that is going to suffer because there's usually a deficiency of that. And they've all measured this now. This has been measured over years. So what we look for is balancing the structure, because if you fix the structure, now that doesn't mean if you don't look at muscles, if you don't look at things that hold those vertebrae into a moving position. Another way to look at the spine is like a bicycle chain. That chain goes over the sprocket, it's going to function. Well, as bicycle chains get a little old, they get a little rusty, they may be a little kinked for anything, it jumps on the sprocket. Sometimes if it's bad, it comes off. So the goal is balance the nervous system, which controls everything, which is going to affect circulation, going to affect digestion, going to affect everything else. Now, the goal is to help the body heal itself. That's what we all do. And that's the whole reason for normalizing spinal function, segmental function, because again, just like anything else, if you have a line of dominoes and if one or two of them is not sitting right, when you go to let them all fall down, one's going to fall, some, the rest of them aren't going to work. So in a long noted question and answer, Yeah, we like to make things function at the highest level, so you function at the highest level.
So a lot of people wait for, they're not proactive and they're more reactive, so they wait for an issue to happen and then they run to a chiropractor. And that's fine, and you should do that if something happens, but isn't the idea to be preventative and go for frequent adjustments to keep you in that alignment?
Yeah, and it really depends on you. I mean, I had patients, excuse me, that for years, literally, I would see on what I call a wellness or supportive care basis. It might be once a month. It might be once every 2 months. I had a couple of patients that came in like once every 6 months, but that's fine for them. They did certain exercises, things like that. But when you look at the stressors in life today and how many people sit, even if they're socially looking at their phone all day long, it puts stress on the neck, it puts stress on the upper back. People that fall down recreation-wise, people that are in car accidents, they just don't realize the amount of trauma force put into the body. I mean, if you're sitting in a car and if you're sitting still, get hit by a car going 10 miles an hour, within less than a second, your head's moving at 2 to 4 times the speed of the impact. Now, it's one thing with all the supportive tissue, it's another thing with the brain slapping around in the skull. So it's really, we look for things, what's the acute pain? And I always tell people, let's see if there's any underlying causes or issues that haven't been found, because a lot of people that will go to a doctor chiropractic, physical therapy, well, even in dentistry, you probably see the same thing. Yeah, this thing's been bothering me on and off for 6 years, and now I can't close my mouth because it hurts so bad. Well, it could have been dealt with earlier, and you teach people again how to stay functioning at the highest level possible for their conditions.
Well, it's even interesting. People come to me with TMJ problems, and one of the first things I do is send them to a chiropractor.
Absolutely.
To get that neck aligned, and our head is about the weight of a bowling ball, and that's heavy, and it puts a lot of pressure on the joints. I mean, there's other factors with TMJ, but that's one of the things. Get yourself in alignment, and then you deal with the other things after that is done.
And actually, the TMJ is a true joint.
Absolutely.
And when you look at all the muscles, I mean, you can bite down. You probably know this better than I do. You literally, if you bit down hard enough, could probably bite your finger off at the back of the jaw. I mean, that's a lot of force to do that. So you can have a jaw problem. You could bite down on something hard and mess that up. You could be in a car accident and mess that up, or fall, or do anything else, or have a chronic injury from years ago and the muscles never healed balanced wise, or they healed with scar tissue, so they start to cause an abnormal pull, and eventually you would get problems that, oh, my teeth are in pain, or my jaw hurts, or your teeth are wearing abnormally. In fact, it was weird because I would get referrals from not only dentists, general practitioner dentists, but we'd get referrals from a couple of TMJ specialists, because if you have to just keep grinding teeth down, you're missing an underlying cause.
Yep. And stress and grinding and clenching, all of these things really create a problem on that joint. And,
there's no doubt.
So I see my chiropractor all the time, our mutual friend, Dr. Parecka.
Yep.
And in fact, I just saw him this past week, and he says, "Boy, you're really out of alignment." And I said, "Well, I was hiking at Ohio Powell, and I was talking to somebody, telling them to look down so they don't get caught on something sticking out of the ground, because we were out in the woods. And what exactly happened to me was, when I turned to say that, I got caught something. I was catapulted down, just like before I even knew it, I was on the ground. And I don't generally fall unless I'm off my bike every once in a while. And then I'm in the office this week, and I go to sit down in a chair, and the chair kicks out, and I'm on the ground again. And I said, I'm out of alignment because I've taken 2 big hits onto the ground. And he did all his adjustments, and I want to see you next week because we got to get you back and all of that. I'm like, I'll be here. It's important. But the fact that I'm keep myself in alignment and I do the things that I do, I didn't have a broken bone. I didn't even get black and blue. And I took some pretty good falls here. So all of this really is important to your overall general health.
It all is, and now chiropractic has changed a lot. Yes, there are still people that do manual adjusting, snap, crackle, pop, but a lot of it's done with technology now. And Dr. Parecka uses technology, and what they really do, it's a NASA-inspired technology. So they literally use a instrument to detect fixations in the spine, alterations in motion. It also works for soft tissue. So then they adjust with the instrument, and the instrument will cause repetitive compression or input until it senses motion, and then it stops, and then you can go back and rescan it. So that's really quite big in the industry of chiropractic today.
And one of your first I can't say
Technological?
it. I get into that mode every once in a while when I'm thinking of something, my brain's working too fast and I can't say something. Maybe I'd make a good president, I don't know. But anyway.
Oh, please.
The first instrument that was used was designed by a dentist.
That's right.
The hammer.
It was actually called an activator. And
Yeah.
my understanding was they used to use it to crack crowns.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a rubber tip on it. I think it was just plain metal. But it puts a quick force in. And here's the thing. When most people say, and you may have been to chiropractors in the past or physical therapists, and they'll say, okay, now relax. Well, what's the first thing you do when somebody says to you, relax?
Tense up.
You tense up. So it takes a certain amount of speed to overcome muscle and ligamentous rigidity when a joint is, quote, fixated. I mean, you've seen people with fingers that have been dislocated and it's all cranked to the side, but you can jam a finger and it still doesn't move, but it looks like it does. So if I'm going to do something with that, I have to move it fast enough. Interesting thing about the spine, and this may be too whatever, but I'm going to tell you, the frequency of motion in the spine to keep everything moving normally is right around 48 cycles per second when the motion occurs. Okay, so the instruments that we use, literally, and that's what I teach. I taught this in China too in 2014, which is really interesting over there. But the point is, they use a subharmonic of about a quarter. So it's 6 to 12 hertz, depending on what this instrument reads. You literally can realign things, because my youngest patient was 2 hours old. My oldest was 104, and everything in between. And some people just don't like having their 2-hour-old or their 2-month-old adjusted manually, even though the babies love it. But so it's a great way, and you're right, the early instrumentation, again, it's designed to fine tune, to figure out where it is, to make the most correction in the least amount of time. And then the second part of that is if you've got altered curves from accidents or from posture or everything else, or bending over somebody all day long with their mouth open, you know, you're going to change muscle tone. If we don't give you certain exercises to help restore a curve or get that structure back up, you're going to continue to, quote, misalign, if you will, and it just feeds, and that's what causes the nerves to be affected, the muscles to be affected, the blood supply to change. I mean, literally, there are a lot of people that have intestinal problems, digestive problems, colon problem, you name it. They've been everywhere, and instead of taking a bunch of medications to, quote, suppress that, you can find a misalignment in the spine, and if that's what it is, and you can fix it, sometimes it's immediate.
Well, allopathic medicine, fantastic. You have an accident, you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, you break an arm, you know, you have a blockage. Those things are all, that type of medical practice is wonderful. It can
Absolutely.
save lives.
Yes.
But overall, it's a matter of suppression of symptoms and signs, and you're not looking at the root cause. And I think what you're talking about is looking at the root cause. You know, tooth decay, tooth caries. You're looking at the root cause, not brushing, too much carbohydrates, you know, those type of things, not getting the calculus and plaque off your teeth. Same thing with gum disease. We treat the root cause, clean it up, keep it nice, and then you don't develop those things. One of the things that really impressed me with chiropractic care was your group was the first group to push nutrition with supplementation, where allopathic medicine still to this day does not do that, although I think they're starting to get it a little bit. And that to me is extremely important, because if you're not supplying the body with the micro and macronutrients that it needs, you're never going to be healthy. And your field jumped on that pretty quickly.
It's been that way a long time, and you have to be careful about supplements because there's a lot of junk on the market out there.
You definitely have to. They're not all made the same.
But you're right. It's like you can have the highest performance race car on the planet, but if you put bad gas in it, eventually it's not going to run. And the thing about nutrition is, today especially, when you look at, 70% of the population minimally is overweight. When you look at kids that are overweight, that have digestive problems, that have all these other things going on, and if you go to a grocery store and you walk in the middle aisles, most of the shelf life there on these packages are a year. And everything has chemicals in it. It's bad enough, we breathe it all the time. But preservatives are actually affecting the way our body deals with nutrients, and it stores in the body and it releases it.
And the sugars that are all in processed food. Every food has some type of sugar in it, and they just have great impact on your overall metabolism, which is the topic of our show today. So what is metabolism?
It's interesting. Metabolism is the function of the body, without you thinking about it, that maintains every freaking cellular function to organ function. And to use a term I know you like, if we can keep everything balanced or in homeostasis, you don't have to worry about it. The problem is, just like when you're under stress, you talked about stress and tension. Toxins are stored in the fat cells in the body. Toxins can affect the gut. Stress triggers the release of those. And unfortunately, when you dump toxic chemicals into the body, that interferes with normal function of the cells. And when you think about it, there's also an energy that goes with that, because each cell operates at about a half a volt of electricity. Now think about that for a minute. A half a volt. How many millions of cells are there in the body? A lot. Multiply that by a half a volt, you got a lot of energy. Otherwise, we wouldn't create static electric shock when we walk across.
Well, there's that, and then look at all the medical devices that actually test our electricity in our body.
Exactly right.
You know, we have EEGs, ECGs, all of these things determine what our electrical potential is. And the interesting concept out there is that every organ, and actually every cell, operates at a different frequency.
Yes.
And that frequency helps us heal, it helps us fight off disease, it helps regeneration of new cells.
Right. That's another thing people don't understand, is your body is designed to get rid of old cells, cells that wear out. And if that doesn't happen, it causes a problem with new cells. So when you cut your finger or anything else, you're going to have cellular damage. And remember, everything has cells too, whether it's skin cells or anything else. But that scar tissue is laid down, and then to return it to normal if possible, or it could be a digestive cell, it could be anything else. Those cells have we'll call it predetermined lifespan. And depending on how much insult you put to it, those cells have to turn over. They don't live forever.
And in fact, they have a lifespan.
They do, right.
You have whole new bones like in 7 years.
Exactly.
You're 7 years from now, your bones will totally be different than what they are now. Your intestinal tract is every 2 to 3 days.
Yes.
So there's that variation with every organ and every cell in your body. So if you're feeding your body correctly, eliminating what I call the insults, which are these toxins that we talk about, or overdoing it on them, and then you have this elimination process, and you're supplying these nutrients, your body's going to keep itself in that homeostasis, and which is balance.
Right.
And when you're in balance, you're not sick.
That's right.
Because we call it something called disease. What is disease? It's really the word dis-ease, out of balance. So it's a battle. It's not easy, but when you put all these modalities together, you can function as a healthy, happy human being.
Right. And you mentioned medicine. I had a number of medical doctors that were patients of mine, and the fact is that they understood that. I mean, I had a plastic surgeon for a patient who used to talk about bending over all day long, doing surgery. He said, I'd get these spasms in my back. I said, while you're holding a scalpel? Dangerous. And so we did fix that. It's really scary because most people are really, I'll call them, it's almost propaganda that take a pill for this, take a pill for that. And how many people, if they really looked at their nutrition, if they looked at their lifestyle, would maybe not have to take a particular drug to suppress stomach acid or to do something else? But it's designed to keep that flow. I don't care what you say, the proof is there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have that. I say that on this radio show all the time. Oh, we've got a pill for this. Well, there are times you need a pill for that.
Absolutely.
But that's not the lifestyle. The lifestyle is, you mentioned stomach acid for a second. If you have heartburn, that's a sign, a symptom that something is out of balance.
Right.
So the answer is, let's suppress the symptom. So you can take blockers that actually stop the production of acid, stomach acid, or you can take something that you chew over the counter that it alkalizes that stomach acid. You can do all of those things, which are temporary fixes, but they have consequences. And the consequence is stomach acid is there for a reason. It's as powerful as battery acid. In fact, actually, it's a little stronger than battery acid. But what does it do? If you don't have stomach acid, you're not breaking down your protein that you just ate, that steak, that vegetable, whatever it is that you're eating, you're not breaking it down into the amino acids that you need to rebuild.
Right. Those are the building blocks.
Those are the building blocks of every cell in your body. Or it's your first line of defense when you're under attack from a pathogen.
Right.
And so we swallow, we ingest, we breathe in, and actually gets into our stomach, bugs, viruses. That stomach acid kills them. You don't have stomach acid? Then now they have an environment to live in. And now you get sick, you get into that disease state. So that stomach acid is extremely important. Yet, I don't have cable TV, but you flick on a TV show, and what do? Stomach acid blockers everywhere.
Right.
So to me, that's a mistake. If you've got an issue with acid reflux, then you have to look at what's causing that. Not, okay, I took something and now I'm fine.
That's one thing. If you ate the hottest chili on the planet and you've never eaten it before, that's one thing. But if you have a problem recurring, and remember, it takes about a 50 to 60% loss of function before symptoms occur. So symptoms just didn't happen today if you didn't get hit by a bus or fall and hit yourself at a high pile. The point is, your body is an amazing reparative defensive system. But if I keep hitting you in the arm over and over again, and I don't give it a chance to heal, if I bruise you,
I'm going to hit your back.
Well, yeah, that's true too. You probably hit me on the first shot. But the point is, that constant irritation, eventually it breaks down the body's ability to deal with it. And that's what causes all this chronic illness.
And actually, if you did that to somebody in the same spot all the time, they'd develop a cancer at that point.
Oh, sure.
At that cell,
What's
that
cancer?
site. Yeah,
Abnormal cells.
Broken DNA bond.
Right.
So the idea is reduce, eliminate the insults. Give us some of those insults.
You mean life?
Well, life can be.
Here's the thing. You can have physical injury. There's no doubt about it. You can have stress. And depending on how you deal with stress, we all deal with stress differently. The problem is when you have a stressful, traumatic event happen and you worry about it, or you're frustrated about it, or you're scared, it changes the blood chemistry like right now. Now, and that's okay, because if somebody scares the heck out of you, you get a cortisol increase, and you're either going to run or you're going to fight. Well, if you're doing something all day long that is putting you under stress and you're suppressing it, you're not suppressing the effect. So eventually something is going to happen. It's the same thing when you talk about thyroid problems all the time, and people have them, but they don't realize they have something going on metabolically to affect the thyroid. And what happens, it only controls just about everything that goes on in the body. And when you look at the energy in the body produces its own energy.
This electric potential that
Electric
we were talking
potential.
about.
And by the way, why does the heart beat? And why do they measure the heartbeat and the electrical current that goes through there? Because if it isn't right, you ain't going anywhere.
So what we're actually talking about is something called mitochondria, and that is really the focus of our topic today for the show. And it's interesting that every cell has mitochondria. Where the most concentration of highest number of mitochondria? The heart.
The heart.
And every organ, every cell has all these mitochondria, but they're all different, and in number and in frequency and so forth. So you can start to see how this all comes together and why we function or why we don't function well. And that, again, we're using that word balance or homeostasis. So we have to support our mitochondria. And one of the things that does that, well, let me make this comment. If your thyroid is not working, none of your mitochondria are working properly, because that's the voltage regulator. You could have a brand new car with a brand new battery, and the voltage regulator is faulty, that battery's dead, the car's dead. Battery will die and the car dies. So that thyroid has to be functioning properly, and that's multiple shows. But that's really what regulates everything, and you need to support that thyroid. But these mitochondria function to produce something called ATP, and there's a whole long process. Both Dr. Fieber and I studied intensely in school the Krebs cycle. It was absolutely a nightmare, because you had to know it. You had to actually, when I was, I don't know how your education was handled, but I was given a blank sheet of paper on a test and said, reproduce the Krebs cycle.
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's all of these steps of how energy is produced, and how it becomes pyruvate and goes from a 3 hydrogen carbon to 2. It really gets complicated. We don't care about any of that. We just want to make sure that we're supplying what we need to supply so that Krebs cycle functions. So we have this electrical potential. When we're not functioning properly, then we go into that disease state. Because one of the things that stops being produced is our ability to have oxygen. And what happens when we go low oxygen?
Well, if you keep going low on oxygen, you're going to go and never come back. The problem is you put the body under stress. And again, when I say stress, I don't just mean emotional stress. I mean physiological stressors. And if you stress the nervous system, if you stress the digestive system, if you stress the immune system, by the way, you can worry yourself into sickness. Why? Because that kind of worry does affect, not to mention bad nutrition, affects your ability of your immune system to function.
Because you start an insulin cortisol process going on that creates a lot of issues internally.
And one of the biggest problems, again, we talked about nutrition. One of the biggest problems is the way we're poisoning ourselves and the food we eat. Now, you want to go to McDonald's and have a Big Mac once in a while, fine. But when you live there, that's a problem. Or when you're eating constantly preserved foods, that's a problem, because where do those preservatives end up? They either damage your gut, and then you're absorbing things you shouldn't be absorbing because it tears microscopic holes in the gut, or what's ever left over is actually stored in fat cells or stored someplace else. So it's an ongoing degradation of your body's ability to function and do what it's supposed to do. And if we give somebody medications, and we have medications in this country that are only legal in this country, they're not legal anywhere else. You can't. Ozempic is one of these drugs, the weight loss drug, take the shot. The company that makes that's from Europe. That drug is not legal in Europe anywhere but here.
Yeah,
we got to be real careful.
Well, there are thousands of chemicals in our food that we even know are carcinogens, and they're legal here, but they're not legal in Europe. How food is made, how it's grown, how the feed for the animals that we eat, all of these things are in the most wealthy country in the world. We have the worst ingredients in what we take in our body.
They claim it's efficiency, but it's not. I mean, if you go, that's why they have organic meats and they have regular. So they feed chickens, they feed cows, they feed everything, growth hormones, they feed them a number of things, antibiotics, so that, guess where that stuff ends up?
If you eat it, it ends up in their meat, and if you eat their meat, you're eating that stuff.
And it may not hurt you, but it may 5 years from now if you eat the same thing. So yeah, go get organic food if you can. Same thing with water. That's another conversation at some point. But
yeah, it's amazing. Those are all insults. And when you're chronically insulting, you're going to have a problem.
Right.
So we're talking about the ability for you to produce the energy you need to regenerate, to stay healthy and stay well. Our focus is on mitochondria and this redox reaction. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we're going to go into depth about those two things. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, where you can hear me live every Saturday morning at AM 1250 The Answer at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And you're actually able to call in and ask questions on myself or my guests. And we're here with one of my favorite guests, Dr. Gary Fieber. And in fact, he's often I call on him and say, Dr. Fieber, what are you doing on Saturday morning? I'd like you to come on. And he usually is able to come on, and we have a great conversation because we're talking health and wellness, your health and wellness. And we're talking today about energy, about electrical potential, reproduction of new cells in the body with something called mitochondria. And we hear metabolism, and people say, I have a slow metabolism, or I have a fast metabolism, or whatever. But really, metabolism is the function of mitochondria. And what is a mitochondria? It's actually origins from bacteria. And the theory is that they were anaerobic bacteria, meaning they were alive without oxygen when the earth didn't have oxygen, and then they started to produce oxygen, and then we got an atmosphere somewhat from the bacteria. That's the theory. And then they became aerobic bacteria, and they're basically a living organism that's within our cells, and they're a cell within a cell, basically, with two membranes. One is a breathable membrane, one is a non-breathable membrane. So it's really an interesting concept, and we're not 100% sure is how they all developed, but we do know we get them mostly from our mother, and the word mito actually Latin for mother. So we don't get mitochondria from our dad, we get from our mother. So if your mother has, let's say, a thyroid issue while you're developing, you potentially have an issue with your mitochondria. So it's really important for a mom to be healthy while you're being developed. And so this word mitochondria is kind of an interesting thing, but it is basically a battery. Wouldn't you call it that?
Yeah, it's a battery, it's a storage battery, but it also produces its own energy. So it recharges itself if things are in the proper perspective for it to do that.
So it's a battery with a positive pole on top and a negative pole on the bottom.
Right.
And we know that every cell functions that way as well because we do something called an MRI, which is an energy force placed upon us. It reverses those poles, and then we can take a picture of it.
That's right.
So if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to do that.
We wouldn't be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to run an EKG. We wouldn't be able to run an EEG. We wouldn't be able to do electrical muscle testing because we are an electric being.
And we need to support that. So there's something that the mitochondria function as, and it's called a redox reaction. What is that?
Well, what happens in redox reactions is that you've got electrons, if you go back to your early days of science, if we remember that far back, there's electrons in the outer part of the molecule. And when you take an electron, you've got negative and positive charge. So you're able, if things are working properly, redox reactions are normal. It's something, another molecule steals an electron from that, or borrows it, if you will, from that outer shell. And it's supposed to happen that way. The problem is, and we can talk about that, if you put too many stressors into the body or onto the body, you create too many of these, what they call oxidative stress molecules, and that can affect everything from metabolic function, glandular function, immune system function, can cause accelerated aging, on and on and on.
Because our immune system really is function of our mitochondria.
Correct.
And if we have healthy mitochondria, we have a healthy immune system. Now, there are other factors.
Right.
The health of your gut, the function of your thyroid, of course, the nutrients that you're taking in, the nutrients that you're not putting in that shouldn't be there, those insults. So the system all works synergistically but it doesn't take much to disrupt it.
It doesn't, and what you have to understand too, which I know you know, is that mitochondria either produce more mitochondria or less mitochondria. They have the ability to either also come together for a better function, or they can actually separate themselves. It's kind of like fusion and fission. Fusion is when they can come together to make a more powerful single unit, or they'll split if there's a stress put on the body and they need to function. So it's really an amazing balance and keeping at least a balance, or homeostasis as we call it, for this electrical energy to do everything in that cell, because every cell has mitochondria in it. So it really is a balancing act, and as long as we don't disturb the environment they're in, i.e. our bodies, our minds, they're going to function at the highest level.
So you mentioned this electron, and it's actually a movement.
Right.
And that's how we measure that. And you said stealer, but there's a donor state. And we really want to be in that donor state more than we are in that stealer state.
Right, because if you're in the stealing of electrons, you're altering, again, the normal, call it normal, quotes, function of whatever that molecule is coming from, whether it's, and some of the things that make it the worst are eating too much sugar. That puts more stress on the body than most people realize, because it throws the balance of absorption and breaking down of food into creating nutrients that the body can use.
Well, it's interesting. Everything that's processed has some form of sugar in it. High fructose corn syrup, synthetic sugars, alcohol itself. All of these, besides the refined sugar, even fruit, which is high concentrated sugar, fruit juices, can throw you off balance. So you have to be careful on the amount that you take in. So what happens is, just say you drink a freshly squeezed orange juice. Well, you're concentrating the sugar, and your body absorbs that very quickly. And fruit juice is fructose, right?
It's fructose, but it's not highly refined.
And there is a slight difference.
Right.
But if you eat, let's say, an apple, you're
Right.
getting sugars, but you're also getting, no pun intended, fiber with that.
Exactly.
And that fiber is going to slow that absorption, so you're not throwing an insulin cortisol response from that as much.
Exactly, and that's the thing, that's the difference. Now, you also, if you eat too many oranges at one time or drink too much real fruit juice, let's assume it's fresh squeezed, okay? Yes, if you're still going to have a reaction to that, most people will. That acidic reaction that occurs is going to create, whether it's sores in the mouth, whether it's the stomach, but normally people don't do that. It's the people who are drinking all this concentrated bottled or canned drinks for, quote, energy, and they find out the more they drink, the more they need, because they're actually destroying the body's ability to balance this energy normally. So there's that fine line, and the more natural the food. But if you don't eat carbohydrates, meaning true carbohydrates, like, now I'm not talking about Snickers bars, I'm talking about, actual vegetables, carbohydrates. If you don't have protein, again, the body will eventually suffer. And every cell, the mitochondria needs the protein, it needs the carbohydrate, it needs from the fruit. Go ahead.
Well, I've got a little different theory on what the body needs as far as carbohydrates go, because your body takes even animal protein and the fats and turns it into the carbohydrates that it needs. So
that's actually true. You can survive without carbohydrates
and actually function well with that.
Absolutely, as long as you can digest that and break that. You can
as
live.
Long as you have the stomach acid to do
right.
that.
And
so
it's not
forth.
suppressed by medication.
Yeah. Your consumption of refined sugar should be very limited. Little fruits and vegetables, probably not so much of an issue. It's these processed foods that create the problem we're talking about. Because you mentioned something of being acidic, and we know that disease state survives in an acidic environment.
Right, absolutely, and that's why the body works real hard to maintain your normal pH. And when you continually insult it and drive that acid level up, and you'll see it with dental problems. One of the
All the
first
time.
places things occur is in the mouth.
And one of the major things that makes you acidic is carbohydrates,
Right.
and especially refined carbohydrates. So the opposite of something being acidic is alkaline. So our blood is slightly alkaline unless we do something to change it. And in fact, when people have diabetes, for example, which is a metabolic function, has a lot to do with your thyroid, and has a lot to do with how your mitochondria are functioning and how your gut is functioning and the insults that you're giving it. But when you can take a certain medication, for example, that they give for diabetes, and you can get metabolic acidosis, which can kill you because of this off balance of carbohydrate function. So everybody says like your brain lives off of carbohydrates. It can. And it has an interesting concept, though, that your brain actually can, if you get into this keto situation, producing ketones, and that acidosis I was talking about is called ketone acidosis, but they're different. Your brain can actually function better off of ketones than it does on carbohydrates, which is an interesting concept.
It is, I mean, they've got enough research to know now that you really can live well on protein. It has to be paced during the day, however, and they've done stuff on intermittent fasting and everything else, which there's some benefits to that. But you're right. Remember, protein has the highest concentration of amino acids. Amino acids are what drive they're the nutrient power in the body.
They're the building blocks.
Exactly right.
And what's interesting is you and I could take a cut of meat, the same cut of meat, cut it in half, and you eat it and I eat it. Your body will reassemble, break that down, and reassemble totally differently than my body will, according to what my body needs or according to what your body needs.
Exactly right. And of course, mitochondria drive the energy levels to do that. And the sad part about life as we know it now is that they found, people are going through, you see all these people with brain dysfunction, and I don't mean stroke dysfunction. I'm talking about cognitive changes. I'm talking about Alzheimer's. I'm talking about all of these studies that are now showing, in fact, in Alzheimer's, they show about a 50% reduction of mitochondria in the brain cells.
Interesting enough, Alzheimer's, dementia, being considered type 3 diabetes.
Yes, it's a new one now.
So just the word diabetes should throw you to this sugar imbalance.
Exactly right. It should, but and that's the whole thing. And the thing about sugar, again, you have to be so careful with refined sugar. They put refined sugar in baby food, in baby formula. Why? That sugar is addictive. It binds the same receptor sites in the brain as cocaine. When they want to study the effects of cocaine on people, they use refined sugars to do it, which is another reason why if you eat a high sugar meal, you're going to get this blast of whatever you want to call it, energy, or oh wow, until you crash somewhere between a half an hour to an hour and a half later. And that depends on where your metabolism is. So anything you eat, and it could be anything, you kind of want to pay attention to it. There are people who, like broccoli is supposed to be good for you, right? There are long chain sugars in broccoli. Some people, or Brussels sprouts, or cauliflower, or whatever, they might bloat up. Well, why are you bloating up eating, quote, something like that? Because your body is unable to process.
And it's fermenting.
Yeah, right. And you ferment a lot of things to turn them into something else.
Yeah.
And so pay attention to it. Pay attention. You might get a rapid heartbeat. You might get tense. You might get nervous. You might go, oh my goodness, I just ate a quite a healthy meal. And yeah, but you feel like you just gained 10 pounds of weight in your gut because, man, that broccoli was good. Well, your body didn't think so. Just because you can eat it doesn't mean somebody else can eat it. And if people pay attention to these, if you continue to have the same reaction, and again, we talked about oxidative stress. Well, again, you're throwing the balance of this off, you're throwing the energy levels off, you throw the pH off, the acid base, and your body is telling you, hey, wake up, man. You might want to reconsider that. Now, it could be just that that's who you are genetically, or it could be you've overloaded yourself so long for things that you literally, your body can't catch up anymore with this normal metabolism.
So we want to try to keep ourselves in an alkaline state, and it's very difficult to do that. There are ways to do it. What you consume, like for example, meat products tend to put you in a more of an acidic state. Dark leafy green vegetables tend to put you more in an alkaline state, but there are other ways to do that. But there's this oxygen relationship with all of this. And the more oxygenated you are, you could be more alkaline. Over-oxygenation, acidic, I mean, it's really this being in balance. So one of the things that people don't consider is something called nitric oxide. And our body makes nitric oxide. We make a lot of it when we're young. We don't make so much of it when we're older. The interesting thing here is you need oxygen to make nitric oxide, but you need nitric oxide to absorb the oxygen. So this consumption of nitric oxide producing things is important. You know, during the COVID phenomenon, people were put on ventilators and they died. It was a death sentence. Very rarely did you hear of anybody that survived being put on a ventilator. Why? Well, some of the research that I've done suggests that nitric oxide levels were low. And had they been given nitric oxide along with the oxygen from the concentrated oxygen from being on a ventilator, they probably would have survived. Of course, we're not talking about that.
No.
But this, again, it's being in that homeostasis and balance of oxygen and nitric oxide. So you can probably Google nitric oxide and read about it, and it's extremely important. There are ways to increase the nitric oxide. Interestingly enough, humming, just humming, increases nitric oxide. Why? Because a lot of the nitric oxide is made in the mouth, actually. So if you're using a lot of fluoride or mouthwashes, you're reducing your nitric oxide. So am I suggesting you do that? No. But I have the fine line here. I have to be careful.
True.
But nitric oxide is produced by bacteria in your mouth. And when you hum, it produces more bacteria. Interesting enough, the thyroid with mitochondria production and all the hormones that are signaling indicators. When we sing, when we hum, when we talk, that thyroid is placed on your voice, on top of your voice box.
For a reason.
Boy, isn't nature amazing?
It is, because what is humming, talking, singing? There's a frequency to it. That vibration.
This vibration, and it actually helps the thyroid produce its hormones and get them into your body. Amazing beings.
It is, and that's why people, if they just pay attention to hopefully how they feel, okay, because there are people who eat certain foods and they get depressed, they get aggravated, they get stressed out. The anxiety comes. Okay, if that's happening on a regular basis and you're with other people and they're eating the same thing and they're not, okay, what reaction, what chemical reaction, what physiological reaction occurred? Whenever the body reacts in a negative way, it's telling you something like, hey, try not eating that for a while and see what happens. In fact, there's a very simple way. People take time. If you were to take your pulse, most people can take it in their wrists. It's easier to take it in the neck on the carotid artery. If you took it for a minute, don't take it for 15 seconds and then multiply by 4. Take it for a whole minute. Got to be relaxed. Take some food. If you want to find out if there's something really bugging you, your body, that you're eating, chew it, but don't swallow it. Leave it on your tongue. Take your pulse again. And this goes back to the 50s, where a medical doctor actually did this work and this research. It's cool. I think his name is Koka. But literally, if your pulse goes up 6 to 8 beats a minute, within 30 seconds of that sitting on there, that's telling you that something in that food your system doesn't like. Now, you can stop eating it for a little while, and maybe that'll go away. But the point is, there's signs all the time. And we're just not, just like now.
So there's hydration. And that term's thrown out there all the time. Be hydrated, drink water. Well, you can actually drink a lot of water, think you're hydrated, and you're actually not, and you're actually flushing out all your nutrients that you need. So it's important to have certain ingredients, electrolytes in the water that you're drinking so that you don't do that. So
Sorry.
we're having a technical difficulty here. That's what I say on the radio show, Dr. Fieber. I'm speaking, maybe we can get some water here, but
pH balanced.
So how important is hydration?
It's amazing. And that's another thing. You've got carbonated water, you've got water, faucet water, you've got bottled water in plastic, and then you have water that has a little bit higher pH to it, which is what? Basic. It's not acidic. Now, you don't want to go too high, but again, if you drink water, we're mostly water.
We are mostly water.
The cells, whether they're muscle cells, digestive cells, you name it, mostly water.
And bacteria.
Right, what happens?
And fungus.
Exactly right. So you should drink, the standard is half your body weight in water a day. Now, I prefer you don't drink a gallon and a half of water first thing in the morning because your bladder may fall out. But the point is, stay hydrated. And by the way, if you stay hydrated, you don't eat as much. You're not as hungry. You usually have more energy.
Sometimes hunger is not a sign that you're hungry, it's a sign that you're thirsty.
Exactly right. Because water, there are people who do water fasts. And literally for a day or two or three, then they lose weight. I wouldn't stay on it. I wouldn't do that. That's just me. But water is so important because what happens if you don't give a plant enough water?
Death?
Yeah, it shrivels up and dies.
Yep.
And there are people who try to water plants and they just kill them anyway, but that's another issue. New show.
That's overwater.
Exactly right. So water is everywhere. Moisture it has to be in your system. People that get dry skin. Now, it could be a vitamin deficiency. However, in the wintertime, why do people dry out? Why do people's skin get drier?
Well, it's interesting. People think in heat you get dehydrated quicker, and you do get dehydrated fast. But you actually get dehydrated in colder weather than you do in faster weather, and you tend not to drink as much when it's cold than when it's hot.
Oh, especially if it's cold water. You don't want to drink it. Drink room temperature water. It's interesting enough, though, going back to mitochondria. Mitochondria actually regulate heat production in the body.
They do.
That's right. And a lot of times, depending on where your fat levels are, that's one of the reasons. Mitochondria, if you get a chill, mitochondria warm you up. They literally cause that we call thermogenesis. But what happens is it increases your body temperature. It's an amazing system that we have.
And actually, that's one of the ways we determine thyroid problems is low body temperature.
Right. And it's the other way around. And with thyroid problems, of course, not only is it body temperature, well, the long time standing test of taking body temperature under your arm. And you look at that, and you can check that every morning for a while. And if you see that at a certain level or it drops, it never comes back up to normal, you've got an indication of a thyroid problem. Now, would that show up initially on a thyroid test? Even though most of them are incomplete, we know that. They don't test all the hormones. But these are what I'm talking about. If people would look at the signs and pay attention to how they truly feel, whether it's sluggishness, whether it's muscle tightness or cramping, or whether it's just they're always, they got a dry throat. They're sneezing a lot of the times, or they eat something and they end up with this reaction. It doesn't have to be an allergic reaction like somebody's going in anaphylactic shock. It can be an elevated pulse. It can be a tightness. It can be a bloatedness. What is that?
It could even be something as simple or as frequent as brain fog.
Oh, exactly right. And then again, there's so much research now with brain fog, cognitive changes, with mitochondria production. And, it's not like you can take mitochondria in a tablet form. If you don't if you don't keep the body functioning at that high level, or if your nutrients fall off, and unfortunately, you're never going to get the nutrients you need in just food. Not in today's society. There are certain, I mean, you know, people who don't get in the sun anymore. Same thing with D3.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. You know, everybody got put on this skin cancer scare and stay out of the sun and put toxic chemicals on your body that actually cause cancer as sunscreens. And your body makes something that it absolutely needs to survive, and it's called vitamin D. We call it vitamin D3, but it's really not a vitamin. It's more of a hormone than a vitamin. And it's produced by something called cholesterol. Of course, the medical profession wants to lower your cholesterol. Your brain is 70% cholesterol. Every hormone in your body is made from cholesterol, but we want to lower it and keep you out of the sun so you're not making vitamin D3. And vitamin D3 is absolutely necessary for your thyroid to function in order for your mitochondria to function. And it's all part of your immune system. One of the things during this viral stuff is keep your D levels up. Now, they can be too high and create a problem, because if it goes a little too high, it can actually lower the production of your thyroid function. But you want it in a sweet spot, which, as this TV show is being produced, is about 75 to 85, 90, right in there on a serum blood test. Mm-hmm. So vitamin D3 is extremely important. And you know, I personally supplement with vitamin D3. I supplement with liposomal vitamin D3. My personal take during the winter is a minimum of 20,000 IUs, international units. 20,000, I said, not 1,000 or 2,000. I take a vitamin blood serum test called a vitamin hydroxy vitamin 20 D325 test to determine where I am, and I think it's important to know where you are before you start doing all of this. But interesting story, I lived in Arizona, sun everywhere, and supplemented with vitamin D3. My vitamin D was low. So vitamin D, as you mentioned, is absolutely critical. You want to take vitamin K2 with it.
Exactly. Of
course, there's some nuances. If you're taking a blood thinner, you have to watch, even though vitamin D2 doesn't really cause coagulation. It's vitamin K1, right? But vitamin K2 is necessary for the function of vitamin D3 to be absorbed. Dr. Fieber, we're at the end of the show. Tell us how people can get a hold of you, what you could maybe advise them for.
Basically, you can call my cell phone number, which is my Minnesota cell phone number. It's 612-750-5553.
And you're often able to advise people on where to go for some.
Oh, yes, and a lot of times we'll refer them to a specialist, just like you mentioned, blood test. It's the blood test. You go to a normal normal metabolic test, they don't test any of this stuff. They test the crisis stuff. So yeah, a lot of times, and I do work with people around the country, but it's a matter of, it's lots of nutrition, it's trying to balance people's lives out, and that's really what we do. And I work with a number of medical specialists in this area and the rest of the country that I'll refer somebody to get a certain specific thing checked.
And I know I get a lot of calls asking for Dr. Fieber's number, and he's able to help a lot of people. Thank you so much, Dr. Gary Fieber, for being on the Dr. Ed Show. And remember, every Saturday morning you can hear us live on AM 1250 The Answer. And remember, this is critical. Healthy pet is a happy pet. When you're healthy, you're happy as well. God bless. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.